Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
What's up, guys? This is Daniel Logan, Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, The Clone Wars, Book of Boba, Skywalker Saga game, and hopefully many more things in the Star Wars galaxy. You are listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Yep, this is the way I've spoken.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And this episode will feature our next installment in the Phantom Menace series. But before we dive back into the Phantom Menace, Jay, where can we be found around the internet?
All right. Well, we can very easily be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the disc is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. And so this is part 8 of our Phantom Menace series. Normally we get guests for this, but we were really up in the air due to a number of circumstances about when and if we were going to be able to record this week.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided just to go ahead and get this one done. We're going to try and get a guest again for next month. Sorry about that. I know it's one of the most popular things about these shows is getting some popular podcasters on the show to help break down the segment. But again, everything being in flux, we just couldn't arrange anything and make it stick. So it's just going to be Jay and I, and we hope you'll indulge us as we get through this portion of the Phantom Menace. And speaking of that, the segment we are covering runs from 1 hour, 22 minutes, and 46 seconds to 1 hour, 33 minutes, and 6 seconds. And we are largely dealing with the aftermath after Amidala is brought to Coruscant and what happens at the Senate. But this segment opens with Amidala meeting with Palpatine. Anakin and Jar Jar are waiting outside a room. Captain Panaka walks in, and Palpatine is briefing Amidala on the state of the Republic. He basically says, you can summarize it this way: there is no civility, only politics. Mm-hmm. And then furthermore, he says there's little chance that the Senate's going to act on the invasion. The Chancellor doesn't have much power. He's mired in baseless accusations of corruption, and that their best bet is to push for the election of a new Supreme Chancellor, which Amidala is kind of aghast about because she describes him as their biggest supporter. And then when Palpatine says their only other course of action would be to file a petition with the courts, she's like, well, that takes even longer in the Senate. So from the top here, I just got a note. It's kind of fun watching like Anakin and Jar Jar sitting outside this room, and you can tell they're like insanely curious about what's going on, but they're not allowed into the room where it happens.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, like the little kids that just can't listen in on the big people's conversations kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And Jar Jar is one of those little kids in this instance for sure. So, the biggest thing that strikes me about watching this segment again is the fact that, we know that Palpatine's pulling the strings. We know that he is Sidious. We know that eventually he's going to overtake all of these things, but every time I rewatch this, I appreciate more and more Ian McDermott's portrayal of this character and just how hypnotizing he is with everything that he says, and just this little buzz in Padmé's ear this entire time, this whole segment, and almost to the point where he's very almost docile and somewhat condescending in some ways, but yet he does it in such an innocent way. Oh, well, I guess we'll just have to be realistic and accept Federation control for the time being. Aw,
Hmm.
shucks. And of course
Hmm.
that just sparks Padme to action right there. And so it's just planting all of these little seeds, and it's just now it's just completely blatant to me that that's what he's doing, but it's fantastic. It's genius. And I just appreciate seeing this every time more and more than the time before.
Yeah, that's a really great observation because you're right. This movie gets criticism for the quality of the acting, which I think, as much as we love George Lucas, and I hate saying this, I think is actually a quality of the directing on this. He wasn't so much concerned with the delivery of lines as he was getting the story out there. But that being said, Ian McDiarmid really invests himself in the role of Palpatine in all
Yeah.
of this. And so he very convincingly leads Amidala down this path that we got a problem. Our planet has been under blockade and it's been invaded. The Senate is slow to act. And not only that, there's special interests that aren't going to want to do anything about this for multiple reasons. One, they don't care. Two, there's corruption. Three, they're in league with the Federation. And the only way we can do this is to cut through this bureaucracy and through the corruption by getting a new Supreme Chancellor, because Valorum has got his hands tied.
Mhm.
And when Amidala isn't like that, he's like, as you said, our alternative is to file a plea with the courts. Well, that's not a great suggestion either. Well, then we're going to have to be realistic. We're going to have to accept Federation control of the planet until one of these solutions works itself out. And of course, what's not said here is that Amidala's like, well, I can't do that because our people are suffering and dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he does, and Palpatine doesn't even have to say that. He knows what she's thinking
Right.
and lets that thought stir in her mind in there. So that's
Mhm.
very, very well done. But the other observation that occurred to me when watching it this time is like, what did Sidious want at the beginning of the movie? He wanted Amidala found, brought back to Naboo, and to sign the treaty.
Mhm.
Well, what if she had done that? He may not be Supreme Chancellor right now.
Mhm. Although I could see where there might be some other cogs that could have turned to still make it so. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like, I feel like this would have been one of several different outcomes that could have still put those wheels in motion for him,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously we know Palpatine is just wicked smart when it comes to his long game and the way that he was pulling on each one of these strings. And so I can't imagine that he wouldn't have had a plan B in place,
Mm-hmm.
and that even if this particular part of the machine may have fallen apart, that there were still other things that could have worked in his favor regardless. You know what I mean?
Perhaps, but I don't think it would happen as quickly as it did.
Mhm.
And here's why. Because why does it have to be Amidala that does the vote of no confidence? Why couldn't any other senator, she's not a senator at this point, why couldn't any senator that's in that chamber have made that call? And I think the answer to that is because her presence there and bringing up this whole notion that there is an invasion, we got to resolve this, and we'll get to this at the end of the, we're kind of jumping forward to the end of the segment, but this whole notion that there's an attack on our sovereignty. You all want to discuss it in the committee. We don't have time for that. And so therefore something has to be done. In the meantime, she's being interrupted by representatives. I think they're from the Trade Federation, or I can't tell if they're from the Federation or Nymodia, but I don't remember. And then the Congress of Malastairs representative shows up, and they are like, hey, we need to send someone to Naboo to ascertain the truth of the situation. And you get this very public display that forces Amidala to do what she says. And I think it's because it's this big public dispute on the floor that the Senate embraces the idea of replacing Valorum.
Mhm. Yeah, 'cause it really did turn very quickly when
Mm-hmm.
that ended up happening, because everyone was saying at fir not everyone, but you could see that there was a lot of resistance to this,
Mm-hmm.
and, "No, we need to follow protocol, and this needs to go to a committee." But then the second his head was on the chopping block, it was like sharks smelling blood. They were
Mm-hmm.
like, "Yes, yes, yes, we gotta vote, vote, vote." So it's crazy the way that it was so wishy-washy in that
Mm-hmm.
way. But yeah, it's almost like a riot mentality in some
Yeah.
ways. But again, go ahead.
I was gonna say, because neither side is happy with Valorum at this
No.
point. You've
Mhm.
got the Naboo that are angry because their planet's being attacked and the Senate's not doing anything about it. And then you've got the Trade Federation and the guys from Alistair that are angry because they're allowing these accusations, which they're considering baseless, to be presented on the floor at
Mhm.
the same time. And so it just became, it created this ripe situation for, this overwhelming sentiment that Valorum's got to go.
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, you've got, we're skipping kind of ahead to the Senate here, but you've still got Palpatine just right there buzzing in her ear. And now this is where he will lose,
Enter the
all
bureaucracy. This is where his power
yeah,
crumbles, right?
almost like narrating the entire thing for
Mhm.
her. And then she's seeing this play out. And so it gets to that point where she's just like, yeah, I got to do this. I got to do this right now.
Well, before we get too much into the Senate scene, because we actually haven't got there yet, let's move ahead in this segment. And so we get to the Jedi Temple, and Qui-Gon is briefing the Jedi Council, and ends his initial presentation by saying, it's like, I can only, he was well trained in the Jedi arts. I can only conclude that this was a Sith Lord. And the Council collectively believes this to be impossible. And because, the Sith have been extinct for millennia. And, I don't think the Sith could have returned without us knowing about it. Really funny how the Acolyte colors this entire
Mhm.
viewing of this segment here. But before we get on to the second part of this segment of the scene, what do you think?
Well, I gotta say that what really struck me is how arrogant the Jedi really were that were
Mhm.
sitting on this council. Because, I mean, did you catch that major side eye that Mundi was given, when
Mhm.
they were talking, when Qui-Gon was talking about this vergence in the Force and how he had the highest concentration of midichlorians and all of these things. And you almost see like Mundi going, yeah, right. Like rolling his eyes, and they're all kind of looking at each other. And Mace is he's just ready to be like done with this. And like they basically shut him down, Qui-Gon down before they even wanted to hear what he had to say. And it's, you talk about the arrogance and the hubris that, Luke eventually alludes to later on. And it really struck me in this scene that they just were so high and mighty that they
Mhm.
just didn't even want to listen to Qui-Gon.
Okay, are you talking about the Sith part of it or the Anakin part of it, or both?
The Anakin, well, both of them
Okay,
really,
yeah, because I
that
was
they
trying to
almost
focus here on
yeah.
the Sith part of it at first.
Mhm, mhm.
But yeah, I agree with all of that. Yeah, the is I think there's one of a couple things. At this point, it's like, you're really bothering with this now. I mean,
Yeah.
we got a crisis going on with Naboo. We sent you to Naboo to get the Queen back, and you bring back this kid that you want to train that's too old. I mean, what
Mhm.
gives, Qui-Gon? It's just kind of so yeah, and there's a lot that's coloring my view of this right now. One, what we just saw in season 1 of The Acolyte. Two, the book that John Jackson Miller just put out there, about the
Yeah.
council, and it kind of feels like they may have forgot everything they just learned in that book.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
like they almost didn't wanna see the nose in front of their face, kind of a thing with the whole Sith
Mhm.
Lord thing.
Yeah, I will say this: it was just kind of as far as Anakin goes, and Qui-Gon presenting it as like a vergence in the Force, and they were intrigued at first, as like around a person, like wow, but then I think Yoda was right in saying, like, revealed your opinion is on this. Qui-Gon's already made up his mind on all this, and he's decided that he's the chosen one, and according to the prophecy. And I've always said this: prophecies are really dangerous things
Mhm.
when it comes down to it. I mean, Qui-Gon clearly believes in this, and I think that's part of where Yoda's frustration with the whole thing comes in. It's just like, you know, you've read this prophecy, you've encountered a kid that's extremely talented. He's got a crazy midi-chlorian count, no doubt, but you've just gone from, point A to point Z with like only hitting point G, O, and T in between.
Yeah, no, I get that. And which book was it, Master and Apprentice, where we learned that Qui-Gon was really almost obsessed with some of these prophecies?
Mhm.
And so it was almost like he was looking for this to happen. But I
Mhm.
mean, realistically, you can't ignore what's right in front of you either. But for him to go so far, I mean, obviously Shmi was the one that put this into his mind that, I there was no father. I carried him, I gave birth to him. I can't explain what happened. But for Qui-Gon to stand there in front of the council and say, it is possible he was conceived by the midichlorians. I mean, that's a huge, huge claim right there. And I
Mhm.
think that that is definitely part and parcel of that obsession, if you will, of prophecy that he has always had.
Yes. And I think the other perspective from the council to look at this is Qui-Gon comes in and he says all this, eludes the prophecy of the Force, of the Chosen One, and then he says things like, "Finding him was the will of the Force," and it's like, okay, I mean, it's kind of off-putting, I think, at times when people come in and say, "I'm the one who knows everything. You got to listen to
Yeah.
me," and you make a really huge, big claim about this, and I wonder if he would not have been more effective if he had said, Masters, I'm concerned. I found this kid on Tatooine. He was exhibiting some force powers. When I tested him, his midi clown was off the charts. And he never brings up this part. His mother said that there was no father on all
Hmm.
this. He just leaps to it was possible he was conceived by the midi chlorians on that one. And he's like, I need your input on this child. And, he's also working against his reputation that we'll see in just a second. That Obi-Wan's like, don't disobey the will of the council again, master. It's
Right.
he's been a maverick, he's been a rogue, and so he's not doing himself any favors. These people are not predisposed to take his side on things. And here he
Hmm.
comes in marching on saying, I know, I've got the answers on this one.
Yeah, yeah, because Obi-Wan, I mean, he pleads with Qui-Gon several times, "Don't defy the Council, Master, not
Hmm.
again." All of these different things, and because he realizes that Qui-Gon's not really making any quote unquote friends by doing that. One thing though that I will say that I think Qui-Gon did do correctly, if I'm, able to
Hmm.
to say that in that way, is that he does ask for Anakin to be tested. I
Hmm.
think the boy needs to be tested, kind of thing. So he was at least putting it out there to the masters to say, all right, let's go about this through protocol. Let's see what you think after you've had a chance to put him before you.
Right, exactly. Yes, his presentation was wrong on this
Right.
one, and he should have come in and I think and been a bit more humble about the whole thing,
Yes, for sure.
and said, this is what I found, but I don't want to say everything I believe because I want you all to draw your own conclusions on this. I mean, because you either when you come in and you make such a big claim like that, you either put people on the defensive against your claim, or you've already colored their perception of the
Right.
matter. And
Right.
so I think he didn't do himself any favors by presenting it the way he did.
Yeah, especially given his track record with the council.
Mhm, mhm. All right. So the next scene is at Queen Amidala's chambers. Anakin is waiting outside. A guard buzzes in, and one of the handmaidens tells him that Anakin be sent in. She comes in. The handmaiden wanders up and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, but Padme's not here." Amidala from off screen says, "Who is it?" And then there's this whole notion that Anakin has shown up, and then Amidala says, "I've sent Padme on an errand," and then Anakin explains, "Well, I'm off to go do my training. I just wanted to say goodbye because I'm not sure if I will ever see her again. I'm hoping to be a Jedi and this, that, and the other." And then, uh, Amidala says, "We are sure her heart goes with you," and so he leaves all happy about that. Then, um, I think for me, what's most noticeable about this is that was Padme, his
Right.
Amidala right there, and Anakin
Mhm.
doesn't pick up on it. And this is not the first time that he gets fooled by this. But what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, the "We are sure her heart goes with you." I mean, I knew
Mhm,
from the get-go watching this the very first time that that was actually Padme.
mhm,
But I will say when I was watching this for our discussion, and I put the closed captions on because I wondered which one of the handmaidens of Padme was the one that answered the door,
Uh-huh.
because as we've gotten since then, we know all of the handmaidens' names and their backstories and that type of thing, but it just said woman.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of, curious if after all of these years, if there will ever be an attempt to redo all of the closed captionings for some of these movies to add in details for characters and little pieces of information or whatever that we've gained since then, because I just think that would be kind of cool. I mean, it has nothing to do with our discussion necessarily, but that's just something that struck me when I was watching that with those closed captions.
It would be fun, but I think they would have to like do like another like a special edition of the prequels before they'd even consider doing something like that,
Mhm.
because they haven't really gone back and done that with the closed captioning for A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, despite all the
Mhm.
supplementals that came out prior to those, over the
Yeah.
multiple different changes they made over the years to those. So,
Yeah. It'd be
but
cool if they did at some
yeah, it
point,
would,
but
no
I know
dispute.
it costs money.
Yeah, that's right.
Everything costs money.
And the thing is that they're not selling Blu-ray the way they used to. The only way you could
Mhm.
watch these movies at home in the past is either catch it on cable or to throw your Blu-ray in. Well, new editions of these movies don't sell the same way. So
Mhm.
that makes me wonder. And you also don't have George Lucas running the show on this stuff, and he was always compelled to tinker with these things.
Yes, this is true. Yeah, good
So,
point.
yeah. All right. So, this is the scene we already kind of talked a little bit, but we'll go ahead and go through it. So we're back at the Senate. Valorum recognizes the chair from the sovereign system Naboo. That's actually Palpatine, and he activates their platform, and it floats out. I love the Senate chamber. I think it is so
Oh,
cool
yeah.
the way that all works. And then Palpatine accuses the Trade Federation of oppressing Naboo, and he presents Amidala to state their allegations. Amidala begins to do so, and she is interrupted immediately by the Nymodians, who want a commission to be sent to Naboo to ascertain the truth. The Congress of Malastare concurs. And then, just as Valorum's about to respond to that, then Masameda whispers in his ears, and Valorum is forced to concede the point and ask Amidala to defer to allow a commission to explore the validity of her allegations. And she says, "Nope, no way. If this body is not capable of making a decision and resolving this, then she calls for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum's leadership." The crowd goes wild, including a bunch of ET aliens sitting there
Yes.
in the Senate there. So I feel like we've kind of covered this portion, but what else, if anything, stands out to you about it?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of hard not to cover this in our earlier discussion
Mhm.
points, just because of the fact that it does kind of flow right in from one idea to the next. But a couple things with this, as you mentioned, with the Senate building itself, and just
Mhm.
how aesthetically amazing this is. And this is one of the triumphs, I think, of what we got in the prequels, is that we sometimes with Star Wars, it's almost too earthly. This is definitely not earthly. So this really does immerse you in that alternate universe that is Star Wars. And I treasure that so much. And the fact that even when we first started this segment and it started off with that view of the tops of the buildings of Coruscant, I mean, that is absolutely gorgeous. And the
Mhm.
the, the scale and everything of what we got to see visually is just absolutely beyond impressive. But getting back to the point of what was actually going on within the Senate building itself and with this whole thing, and as we alluded to just a little earlier, with Palpatine just buzzing in Amidala or Padme's ear about this, she had, I think, was resisting having to call Valorum out on this vote of no confidence because, as she mentioned earlier, he's been one of her biggest supporters. But then, as Palpatine was saying, and this is where he concedes and da 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 da, and she's like,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, like I said before, this is the time to act. We have to do this. We're not going to sit in committee while my people are dying. We have to do this. My sovereignty is being attacked, and so the rest is history. Now, question though, were the ET aliens always in this, or was this more of like a special edition kind of a thing? I mean, not that there was like, you know what I'm saying? Like, was
No,
this
they were always
added
there.
later? They were
Nope,
always
they
there?
were always
Okay.
there. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't catch it in my first viewing, but I heard about it. I can't remember where exactly. It may have been online in one of those old
Mhm.
discussion forums or whatever, some early Star Wars website. And I spent my next couple of viewings trying to remember to look for them, and then I was really excited when I did in the theaters.
Yeah.
But there they
Well, I
are.
I wonder if this is one of those same sorts of things when we were talking about the pod race, and if you watched it in 4:3, aspect ratio from a DVD that you didn't
Mhm.
get to see Aura sing.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering if this is one of those kind of things, and that's why maybe I didn't really realize that they were there until much later.
Mm.
Not that this was the first time that I realized they were there, but, it wasn't at first when we first got this back on DVD. Maybe I could have picked it up when I was in the theater, but I don't remember it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, they're definitely there. But to kind of fall back on some other things that you were saying here is, yeah, this scene really is a payoff to that earlier conversation and to the point you're making here. it- Palpatine completely primed Amidala to make that motion, that vote of no confidence. And I think what sealed the deal was well, I think we're going to have to be realistic, Your Majesty, that we're going to have to accept Federation rule of our planet for the time being.
mhm.
And so as soon as she's asked about deferring, she didn't even give any thought at that point. It's like, no, it's, she knows how, she already knew, but then Palpatine reminded her that this is not going to be quickly resolved under the way the Republic works right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so she makes that move. It may have been a little bit rash, and she may come to regret it 10 years later. But at the time, it was what she needed to do to help her people. So,
Yep, for
well,
sure.
even then, she does that, and the Republic has nothing to do with helping her people
No.
in that situation.
Yeah, and I don't think that she did not take any joy in
Hmm.
having to do that vote of no confidence. I mean, you could tell it was the last thing that she wanted to do,
Hmm.
but she felt like it was something she had to do.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the scene shifts to the balcony at the Jedi Temple. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are having a discussion while Anakin's getting tested. Obi-Wan says that Anakin's not going to pass the Council's tests. Obi-Wan encourages Qui-Gon not to defy the Council again, and Qui-Gon's retort to that is, "I will do what I must." And and then Obi-Wan reminds me, if you would follow the code, you would only, if you only follow the code, you would be on the Council there. And so we're seeing a few little micro cracks here in the relationship between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. Um, what are your takeaways from this scene?
Well, one thing that I guess I didn't realize before was how adamant Obi-Wan was about being so sure that Anakin was not going to pass the council's test.
Hmm.
And I guess my question is, did he believe that it was because Anakin wouldn't perform to be able to pass the test, or did he believe that the council wouldn't allow him to pass the test?
Well, I guess my answer to that is, what do you believe the test to be? If it is
Say that
just
again, you cut out.
if okay, my response to that is this question: what do you believe the test to be that the council was going to administer to Anakin? Because if it's just seeing the images on the screen, Obi-Wan already knows Anakin's got this gigantic midi-chlorian count, and he did something that humans aren't capable of doing by winning the pod race. But it's if the test is not just that, but answering the council's questions about what your thoughts dwell on and fear and anger and all that. I think Obi-Wan was correct in
Mhm.
that regard, that he knew that, like, we don't train older kids for a reason here. And already on the flight home, or the flight to Coruscant from Tatooine, Anakin's been missing his mother
Mhm.
and the like. So I don't think this is an errant observation on Obi-Wan's part.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too, because at the time, when we saw this for the first time, we didn't know what the test would be.
Hmm.
And so I guess I'd always just assumed that the test was, the ship, the cup, the speeder kind of thing. But, when you put it that way, and then getting into the scene where Anakin is being tested, and again, kind of jumping ahead here, but there are things that they're almost like putting words in Anakin's mouth, and they were putting ideas in Anakin's head that weren't there. And it struck me that, again, I'm kind of like dissing on Mundi here,
Mhm.
but he was like, your thoughts dwell on your mother. As I was watching it this time, I'm like, oh, so now you're a mind reader too, Mundi? Like, exactly what he's thinking right now. And you could kind of chalk it up to the Force and the feelings that they're getting about Anakin through the Force. But it was so funny because Anakin's like, well, duh.
Mhm.
Yeah, I miss her. Duh. And then all of a sudden Yoda's like, "Oh, afraid to lose her you are." And
Yeah.
then
So you moved into the next scene.
yeah, I kind of had to. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Let's talk about some of those points there. One, yes, it is always murky about what the Jedi can and cannot do when it comes to reading the thoughts of others. And, they had to, in the Clone Wars, it took 3 Jedi using a Force technique to get information out of Poggle the Lesser, at one
Mhm.
point. And meanwhile, you've got a bunch of Jedi Masters sitting around a chamber, casually reading Anakin's mind or figuring out where his thoughts. So I don't want to say they could predict everything he was going to say, but your thoughts still on your mother. And then it's like, see through you, we can. They knew what was going on. As to whether they were putting words in his mouth, I don't know it was that so much is that they were trying to see if Anakin was being straight with them on
Mhm.
this. Because Yoda's got this big lesson to impart. It's like, how feel you? Cold. And then it's like, there's this whole notion of fear. Well, I'm not afraid. And your thoughts dwell on your mother, and miss you, and you're afraid to lose her. I think. Well, what's that got to do with that?
Right.
He's a kid and he backtalks to them.
Mhm.
And then, Yoda's response is like, it's got everything to do. It's like, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear, this famous thing that we all know. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And that's their biggest concern. That's why they don't take kids, that are already out of the cradle, so to speak. Because even at that young age, you start to get stuck in your ways. You miss things. You become possessive of things. And they don't have the ability to go in and break those attachments at that
Mhm.
age.
Mhm.
And perhaps if Anakin's responses have been on this, it's the, your thoughts dwell on your mother, miss her, you do. Yes, I miss her. I hope she's doing well, but I'm proud of the opportunity she gave me and that she understood that I need to do what I was going to do. But you see, Qui-Gon didn't even tell the Jedi Council about the departure there. He kind of skipped that part, that there was this tearful goodbye and how much Anakin missed his mother on the way from Tatooine to Coruscant,
Mhm.
which it's pretty big a mission given what
Mhm.
the Jedi standards are.
That's true. I mean, I guess I didn't think about it that way. Did Qui-Gon really give them like a full debriefing of every
Mhm.
single little detail of what Anakin experienced between the time that he met him and the time that he appeared before them? So, I'll definitely give you that. And, for me, again, I'd always just taken this at face value that here's the Jedi Council. They're looking out for the best interest of the galaxy, which I do think that they were,
Mhm.
in this instance, because as you pointed out, kids that were of Anakin's age were considered too old to start the training because they had already had too many experiences with attachment and with different types of things that could cloud their ability to be able to be sort of a tabula rasa, a blank slate when it came to their training kinds of things.
Mhm.
But and we've always talked about how the idea of being cold is also sort of akin to the feeling of the dark side. But I almost wonder, once again, is it here's this kid and this was sort of set up on the ship when Anakin was shivering on the way to Coruscant, and we said, well, heck yeah, he just came from a desert planet. Space is cold. He hasn't had time to adjust to it. And now here he is standing in this big breezy chamber, and Yoda asks him how he's feeling, and he's like, cold. And then automatically Yoda's like, oh no, this is the dark side, you're afraid, and all these different kinds of things. So I'm a little, as I watch this again, I'm a little bit torn with that. And I know I keep playing like devil's advocate and trying to point out all the horrible things that the Jedi are doing, but I think it's just good discourse for observation, kind of thing.
Mhm. What does Luke feel when he senses the cave on Dagobah.
Oh, cold. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
that's the equivalent usually
Yeah.
of
No, it's just
the
it's
dark side. Yeah.
exactly there. And
Mhm.
so, I think this movie led us to believe cold was just like you said, he came from a warm planet. now,
Right.
now the Jedi, like, doesn't matter where you came from. You feel cold here in this comfy Jedi Council room.
Yeah.
That's a problem. So, and it's kind of I think they looked at it as an evasive answer.
Mm,
It's you're saying you're cold, but you're really, that's a sensation when you've
sure.
got these other emotions that you're
Right.
not telling us about here.
Right.
So
But they could have said, "How what are you feeling emotionally?" They just said, how do you feel?" And he's 9, 10-year-old kid. He's gonna say cold. Like, if
yeah,
you
I
ask a
don't think that
9-year-old,
was
"How are you
intended to be a
feeling?"
tip.
"I have a tummy ache."
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it was intended to be a trap. And
No, I
because
know.
they
I'm
didn't admonish
playing.
him for it, it's like, Kiada he patiently says, your thoughts dwell on your mother.
Mhm. He
And
does say it patiently.
yeah, and then Anakin's like, well, I miss her. And then, Anakin said, or Yoda says, you're afraid to lose her. And then he's like, what does that have to do with anything? That's when Anakin kind of starts to lose his patience with all this.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
he is a 9-year-old in a room with a dozen Jedi Masters. I could see how that
Sure.
might be intimidating. So,
Just a bit.
yeah.
For sure.
All right. Well, back in Amidala's quarters, she is looking out the window, and Jar Jar happens to be in the room, which seems like odd company given the situation.
Mhm.
And so he starts talking to her. You used to thinking, people gonna die? And she's like, I don't know. And Gungans get pasted too, eh? I hope not. Gungans no dying without a fight. We's a warriors. We's a got a grand army. That's why you no liking us, Misa thinks. So
Nice. That
thank
was
you.
very good.
Practice that. And so, we talked about like people planting thoughts in Amidala's heads. This
Yeah.
one is a seed right there. It's, she's like, you can tell in this scene, it's like, this is the person who's been like the most straight with me in this entire
Uh-huh.
trip. It's like he's not offended at the moment that Naboo and Gungans don't get along. It's, he's showing empathy towards her. And then he's like, it was bad for you. He took Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's words to heart, like a symbiont circle. What happens to one happens to the other. And
Mhm.
he's like, this is bad news for us too. And then just is like, well, we're not going to go without a fight. The Naboo pretty much rolled right over for the Trade Federation, but he's saying that's not what we're going to do. And she grasped right onto that.
Yeah, and it's funny because like we were saying with the little buzzing in the ear, it's very two different breeds of bees
Mm-hmm.
going on right now. But I was waiting and I was trying to observe how if there was any change in Padme's face when he says this, would there be just a little bit of an arch in her eyebrow when
Mm-hmm.
he says, "Oh, we so warriors," but she, to her credit, very stoic. She
Oh
didn't
yeah.
let on anything, and that's just a tribute to her leadership as a queen and a politician right there.
Yeah. The Senate chamber is like where the most emotion appears on Amidala in this entire
Hmm.
movie. It's like, I've come before you to resolve this attack on our sovereignty now, and
Right.
it's the otherwise, as you said, it's always that same stoic monotone voice that
Hmm.
Amidala uses. Beyond that, like when she's thanking R2D2, but that's not even Padme at the time.
Right.
So it's Sabe, I believe. Oh, thank you, R2D2. Padme, clean them up. But so right, so their little conversation gets interrupted with Panaka and Palpatine coming back in, and Palpatine is all smiles from ear to ear. And Panaka announces that the nominees to succeed Valorum are Palpatine, and then after Amidala asks for more information, we find out that it's also Bail Tillies of Alderaan and Ailey Team of Malastare are the other candidates. And of course, I'll let you do this line. Palpatine says it is.
A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one.
Mm.
That's always one of my favorite lines.
Uh-huh. I
They
know.
use
I
that one
know.
a lot.
Yeah. But then Amidala fears that there'll be nothing left of the people in their way of life by the time Palpatine has control of the bureaucrats, and she announces she's going back to Naboo. She's not going to sign any treaty. She's going, he's in his arena. She's going back to hers. And then she leaves with this parting thought. It's clear to me now that the Republic no longer functions. I pray you will bring sanity and compassion back to the Senate. And she's right. It doesn't function. It does not work. And she risked her life to come here only to gain nothing out of
Mhm.
all of this. And so now she's got to go back and rally the Gungans and get support and try to win this fight herself against the Trade Federation.
So I have to ask you, how do you think, we've been kind of trying to pick apart Palpatine's brain, psychologically speaking, and
Mhm.
what are his true motives for everything along the way? And as you were saying, if certain things wouldn't have happened and maybe he wouldn't have been able to get this vote of no confidence and then had this fall into his lap so easily. But it struck me that when he was talking to Padme about, or Amidala, about going back to Naboo and her saying she will sign no treaty, and he was almost like, "Stop, no, come back," kind of a thing,
Mhm.
where in what I was picking up on was, "Good, I hope you go get killed." Did you get that feeling at all?
Um, uh, hmm. I don't know that I
It's
picked
like,
that
"Oh,
up. I
no,
mean,
please don't leave."
well, again, to me, Ian McDermott is like the most convincing actor in this movie,
Oh, for
and
sure.
I got it as like no, stay here where it's safe. And Sidious has already told Newt Gunray, it's like, you'll find controlling her, she's young and naive. You'll find controlling her not to be difficult. Well, you know, he kind of, I don't know if necessarily controlled her, but he certainly did manipulate her, and it wasn't particularly
Mhm,
difficult in this
mhm.
situation. As much as we all love Padme and Amidala and how smart and savvy she is, she got played in this movie, in these scenes on Coruscant.
Oh, yeah.
And, so maybe the thought is for Palpatine that while she's there, he can continue to manipulate her. He just got her to call for a vote for no confidence, and he's already certain that he's going to be the next chancellor. He's kind of bragging about and strutting about it. And I can see that as being off-putting to Amidala. It's like, great, good for you. But how does that help our people? I mean,
Yeah,
does that
yeah.
get relief to them any quicker and when?
Mhm,
So I could see why she might be offended by that when it's all said and done. But yeah, maybe there's that. I mean, it's probably a win-win situation for Palpatine. If she stays there, she can be a tool. I hate saying that about her. I really
but
do.
no, it's true. I mean, you're
Yeah,
absolutely right. I mean, that's what, he was pulling the puppet strings with her.
right. But if she goes and gets killed, well, then he can use that to his advantage too.
Right, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
he can play the sympathy card for that
Hmm.
one.
All right.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so she leaves. I think that was a really great scene for Amidala when it came down to it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, any other thoughts about this scene or this segment before we wrap it up?
Well, like I said, I just pulled out so much more in this little 10-minute segment, I
Mhm.
think, than I really ever have before. And I think the older that I get, the more I do appreciate the politics and the machinations and things like that, because I've never been a politics person. And it was just always something that was more background noise for me in all of these movies. But I feel like just understanding it a little bit more and being more observant actually really does help for me anyways to even enrich the experience even tenfold as much as
Mhm.
I've seen these movies. I mean, it really does enhance them just that much more for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is my favorite viewing of this segment of the movie as well, to get ready for this discussion. Like to your point, got a whole lot more out of it, examining the scenes in this detail the way we just did gave us a chance to focus on those parts in a way that I just had never done before. So,
Yeah, definitely.
all right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the discussion as much as we did. And if so, then I invite you to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already, and you'll get our next installment next month when that comes out automatically, downloaded to your podcatcher of choice. And would encourage you to go check out past episodes of the show over on retrozap.com. It's got our entire catalog of the previous 770 episodes, which is probably 570 more than you can get on the average podcatcher. And we got some really great stuff in the past, if I do so myself. And
I'm
while you're
sure.
Retro Zap, you can check out some other great podcasts such as Animaniacast, Dork Lair, Enjoy Stuff, and Superhero Suite. There's a lot of things going on over there on Retro Zap. If you've got 30 seconds and you want to do us a favor, for which we'd be very grateful, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and a written review. And that helps the algorithms get this show in front of more people. And I will read those reviews on the show. And the other thing you can do that would be greatly appreciated is to share the show on social media with your friends. Jay, you want to let everybody know what our social media contacts are so they can do that, and where else we can be found around the internet?
Sure thing. We are very easily found on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust. We also have tons of Pinterest boards over on our Pinterest page, as well as all of our episodes can be found on YouTube and YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. Those also support reviews and interaction. So we'd love to see it if you would love to go over there. And then we also have our Discord room on the Rushes Up Discord server. So if you're up for some real-time chatter, you can hop on over there. And our TeePublic store has 7 different show logo designs on it, on everything from home goods and apparel and tons of stuff in between. So once again, you can hit up the link in our show notes for that, or just head straight to TeePublic and you can find us there. And then last but not least, we are still partnering with Saber Masters, where you can find dozens of different battle-ready lightsabers in all types of hilts and styles. And so if you are in need of a new lightsaber or 2 or 3 or however many you would like in your arsenal, you can head over to sabermasters.com. And when you do go to checkout, make sure you put the code Stardust in at checkout. And that code Stardust will earn you an extra $10 off of your purchase and also helps to support the show.
All right, Jay, before we get out of here, you want to remind everybody what you got going on with cosplay?
Right, absolutely. So you can still catch me over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay, and a little quiet right now. I've been calling it the calm before the storm, but as Dennis likes to say, cosplay Geddon will be hitting again very shortly. So I've got a very busy fall ahead of me, but you can always catch me as Ahsoka, 2 different versions of Hera, the 4th sister, my original concept Mandalorian, and several other things as well. And I always try to lift people up in my stories and support other cosplayers and content creators as well. So again, you can check that out at j.snipscosplay.
Right. And I guess I should mention also that I'm a guest on an episode of Reading Between the Reels, part of a great panel. That's a podcast you can find on all your podcatchers, celebrating the 100th episode of that show. And we have a great discussion about movies that, what's your favorite movie and what's one that you would, if you only watch one on a desert island for the rest of your life, what would it be? That type of thing. So make sure you check that out on your podcatcher of choice. So upcoming on the show on Friday, it's our weekly look at Star Wars news. And then Monday, we'll be getting back into the Clone Wars with our rewatch. And that'll be episode 3 of season 1. So thanks for downloading and listening to episode 771 of Podcast Stars, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.